Today's story is so tender it aches, so forbidden. It stills your breath set between frost-covered plains and lantern-lit evenings on the edge of two colliding worlds. This is the place where fate draws a line in the red Oklahoma dirt, and two people quietly decide to step across it together. It begins with the soft creak of a trading post door on a bitter November morning in 1887. A single respectful glance held one heartbeat too long. Small enough to miss, powerful enough to unravel a lifetime of careful solitude. Before we step into this forbidden frontier, love, don't forget to smash that like button if you love stories that hit deep, and drop a comment telling me which state or country you're watching from right now. 8 months had passed since Lorna Ashfield took over her late father's trading post when Tarev stepped through the door one bitter November morning in 1887 and quietly altered the course of her carefully arranged life. Lorna was 26, unmarried, not because she lacked offers, but because she had chosen independence over expectation. For 3 years, she had lived in the rough Oklahoma territory, proving mostly to herself that a woman could run a frontier business just as well as any man. Her father, Aldrich Ashfield, had died suddenly the previous March. Nearly everyone assumed she would sell the trading post and return east to live with her aunt Elsbeth Harrow in St. Louis. Instead, Lorna stayed. She refused to abandon the place her father had built from nothing. More than that, she refused to surrender the hard-won independence she had carved out for herself. Tarev was Apache, though the English name he carried had been given to him during the years he spent in a mission school as a boy. He worked as a freighter driving wagons loaded with supplies between scattered trading posts and settlements across the territory. Lorna had seen him before in passing. He had traded with her father many times, but she had never paid him much attention beyond polite business exchanges. That morning, however, something felt different. Perhaps it was the way his dark eyes held hers a second longer than courtesy required. Or perhaps it was simply that she had been alone too long, and even the smallest spark of connection now carried a dangerous promise. "Miss Ashfield," he said, removing his hat and holding it in both hands, with a respectful formality that seemed almost out of place beside his dust-stained trail clothes. "I heard about your father. I'm sorry. Aldrich Ashfield was a fair man. That's more than most folks in this line of work." "Thank you," Lorna replied quietly, surprised by how much the simple words mattered coming from him. Many of the other traders' men, like Garrick Sloan and the rest of his crowd, had offered condolences too. But their sympathy always carried an unspoken assumption that she would soon close the post. Their interest felt less like kindness and more like calculation, as if they were already dividing up her inventory in their heads. "He spoke highly of you," Tarev continued. "Said you were dependable." Coming from him, that meant something. I tried to be. Tarev placed a folded list on the counter. His handwriting was neat, careful. "I'm hauling goods up toward the agency," he said. 3 weeks on the road. I'll need provisions, flour, salt, pork, coffee, plus the usual trade goods. Think you can fill it?" Lorna scanned the list, already sorting numbers and stock in her mind. "I can have everything ready by tomorrow afternoon," she said. "If you need a place tonight, you're welcome to camp behind the post. There's a barn with clean straw, and the creek's good for watering horses. I'd appreciate that." The tension in his face eased slightly, though the quiet reserve she had noticed before never fully disappeared. Men from the Apache bands, people like those among the Tavok community, often carried that same guarded distance around white settlers. Too many promises had been broken over the years for easy trust. "Business hasn't been easy since your father passed," Tarev added. "Some folks aren't sure about trading with a woman." He paused, then said simply, "I don't share that concern." From what I have seen, your father taught you well." It was a small acknowledgement, yet warmth spread through Lorna's chest. "I learned from the best," she said. "And I plan to prove I can run this place just as well as he did. Doesn't matter what people think about a woman running a trading post. I believe you." The certainty in his voice made her look at him more carefully. He appeared to be in his early 30s, lean and strong from years of physical labor. His cheekbones were sharp, his expression serious, and his mouth looked as though it rarely smiled, but might be striking when it did. His dark hair hung long, tied back with a strip of leather. His clothing blended frontier practicality with hints of Apache tradition, as if he belonged to two worlds, yet was claimed fully by neither. Over the months that followed, Tarev became a familiar sight at the trading post. Every 3 weeks his freight wagon rolled into the yard. He stayed overnight to rest his horses and restock supplies. Each visit lasted a little longer than the one before. Soon he found reasons to help around the place. He climbed onto the roof to repair a leak that had plagued the building for years. He rebuilt the sagging corral fence. One afternoon, he chopped enough firewood to carry Lorna through half the winter. She told herself it was practical to accept the help. Maintaining a good relationship with a reliable freighter was good business. But every time she heard the rumble of his wagon wheels approaching the yard, her heart betrayed her. Their companionship grew into something easy and natural, more comfortable than any relationship Lorna had known before. Tarev spoke little, but when he did, his words carried thought behind them. He noticed small things most people overlooked: when she was tired, when a shipment had gone wrong, when she simply needed someone nearby without conversation. And Lorna began noticing things about him as well. The precision of his hands, whether guiding reins or stacking crates. The rare smile that softened his otherwise serious face. The sharp intelligence behind his quiet eyes. The first time they truly touched happened in early February. Lorna was carrying a crate of canned goods across the yard when her boots slipped on a sheet of ice. The world tilted beneath her feet. Before she could fall, Tarev caught her, his arms wrapped around her waist, strong and steady. For a moment, they stood frozen, her back pressed against his chest, both of them breathing hard from the sudden fright. Through the layers of her winter coat, she felt the warmth of his body and the steady rhythm of his heart against her shoulder. Something shifted. A line they had carefully avoided crossing suddenly seemed meaningless. "Are you hurt?" Tarev asked softly near her ear. No, Lorna managed, though. Her legs trembled for reasons that had nothing to do with the ice. "Just clumsy." "Thank you." He released her slowly. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary before he stepped back. "You should watch your footing," he said. But something in his tone suggested he meant more than ice. "I'm always careful," Lorna replied, meeting his gaze. "Sometimes too careful. Sometimes I think I've spent so long protecting myself that I forgot how to take risks." Tarev studied her silently. She could see the same struggle in his expression that stirred inside her the pull of something deeper, fighting against the reality of what it would cost. He was Apache. She was white. The frontier was more tolerant than many places, but it was far from kind to those who crossed lines society insisted should remain uncrossed. A relationship between them would spark gossip, judgment, and possibly worse. "Not every risk is worth the price," Tarev said at last. Yet the words carried a little conviction. Lorna sensed he was trying to convince himself as much as her. They never spoke openly about that moment. Still, something in the air had changed. Tarev continued arriving every 3 weeks, still helping around the post. But now there was a heightened awareness in every glance, every step they took near one another. they avoided touching. Yet somehow that careful distance felt more intimate than contact ever had. Lorna often caught herself studying Tarev when she believed his attention was elsewhere. Her eyes traced the broad line of his shoulders, the quiet strength in the way he moved the loose strands of dark hair that slipped forward whenever he bent over his work. And deep down, she sensed he noticed her just as often. His gaze carried a quiet intensity that lingered long after it passed heavy enough to feel almost like a touch. That year, spring arrived late. Winter clung stubbornly to the plains, holding the land in its icy grip until well into April. When the weather finally softened, Tarev rolled into the trading post yard with a wagon full of goods and unexpected news. A gathering was being held about 15 miles north among the Tavok community, celebrating the beginning of the planting season. "You should come," he said. The words sounded casual, but the seriousness in his eyes told another story. "It's not only Tavok families," he added. "Some settlers will be there too. Traders, their wives, folks passing through." He paused a moment before finishing. "Could be good for business. Meet new people." Lorna almost smiled. She recognized an excuse when she heard one. Tarev was offering her a glimpse into his world, while giving them both a respectable reason for the invitation. "Well," she replied lightly, "I suppose meeting more people might help the trading post." "When is it?" she asked. "Saturday evening," he answered. "I could ride by around 4, bring you up in the wagon if you'd like." "That would be practical," Lorna said. They both pretended practicality was the real reason. Saturday arrived beneath wide blue skies and a warm sun that hinted summer was finally on its way. Lorna spent longer than she cared to admit choosing what to wear. Eventually, she settled on a simple blue cotton dress nice enough for a social gathering, but plain enough that it didn't look like she was trying too hard. She braided her dark hair and pinned it neatly at the back of her head. For a moment, she studied her reflection in the small mirror, wondering what Tarev truly saw when he looked at her. Did he see only another white woman running a lonely trading post, or something more? Tarev arrived precisely at 4, guiding his wagon into the yard, with the same steady confidence he brought to every task. When he reached up to help Lorna climb onto the seat, his hand closed around hers and lingered just a second longer than necessary. They traveled north across rolling prairie that had begun to burst with spring grass. The conversation stayed light weather supply routes, politics drifting through the territory like dust on the wind. Still, Lorna remained painfully aware of how close he sat beside her. Every time the wagon rolled over a rut and their legs brushed together, warmth spread through her chest like wildfire. The Tavok settlement was larger than she had imagined. The land held a mixture of homes, some traditional structures, others wooden houses that might have fit easily into any frontier town. Lanterns glowed across the open ground where the celebration had already begun. Tables overflowed with food. Nearby, a group of musicians, led by Roland Mercer, played lively melodies that blended frontier fiddle tunes with rhythms from the Tavok people. Tarev guided Lorna through the gathering, introducing her to families and travelers alike. There was a quiet pride in his voice when he spoke her name, as though presenting someone important rather than merely another outsider. Slowly, Lorna relaxed. The music drifted warmly through the night air. Laughter carried across the firelit clearing. Every so often, Tarev's hand settled lightly at the small of her back, while he steered them through the crowd. As evening deepened, the sky faded into brilliant shades of orange and violet. Finally, Tarev turned to her. "Would you dance with me?" The tune was slow, gentle, a song about seasons passing and hearts finding their way back to one another. When Tarev drew her into his arms, Lorna felt something shift between them, like crossing a quiet boundary neither of them had dared approach before. They moved together naturally, as if their bodies understood a truth their minds were still trying to accept. For the first time in months, Lorna allowed herself to lean into him, to feel safe, and at the same time, dangerously uncertain. "People are watching us," she whispered, noticing the curious glances from settlers and Tavok families alike. "Let them watch," Tarev murmured. His voice carried a quiet determination. "I'm tired of pretending I don't care about you." Lorna's breath caught. "I'm tired of pretending distance matters just because other people think they get to decide who I care about." He continued softly, "I know exactly how complicated this is. I know what folks will say." His gaze held hers firmly. "But Lorna, I've spent 3 months trying to convince myself this was only friendship or attraction, anything but the truth." He exhaled slowly. "I can't do that anymore. I care about you more than I probably should." Tears stung Lorna's eyes, relief mixed with fear swelling inside her chest. "I care about you too," she confessed quietly. "I tried not to. I kept telling myself it was foolish, impractical. But you make me want to stop living so carefully." Tarev pulled her closer as the music changed to another song, yet neither of them moved away. "So what happens now?" he asked. "I honestly don't know," Lorna admitted. "But I'm tired of pretending this doesn't exist. Maybe we just take it one day at a time, deal with trouble when it comes instead of fearing it before it arrives." "That sounds terrifying," Tarev said, though a faint smile touched his lips. "It is," she agreed softly. "But the best things usually are." They left the gathering close to midnight. Tarev guided the wagon slowly through the dark prairie, while Lorna sat close beside him, her head resting lightly against his shoulder. Months earlier, such closeness would have felt scandalous. Now, it felt natural. When they reached the trading post, Tarev helped her down. For a moment, they simply stood there, hands clasped together, neither willing to step away. "Stay," Lorna blurted suddenly. The word escaped before she could stop it. "I mean," she stumbled, flustered. Not like that. I just... maybe stay for coffee, or talk a while. I'm not ready for the night to end." Moonlight lit Tarev's face as he studied her carefully. Lorna could see the quiet calculation in his eyes, balancing propriety against desire. "Lorna," he said slowly, "if I come inside, people will talk. They'll assume things happened, whether they did or not. Are you ready for that?" She squeezed his hands. "Honestly, I don't know," she admitted. "But I know I don't want you to leave yet. And I'm willing to face whatever comes with that choice." Her voice softened. "I'm not asking anything you're uncomfortable with, Tarev. I just want more time with you. Is that so wrong?" He shook his head slowly. "No," he said quietly. "It isn't wrong at all." A faint smile crossed his face. "In fact, it might be the most right thing I've felt in a long time." They stepped inside together. Lorna lit the oil lamps while Tarev stirred the coals in the stove until a warm fire crackled to life. Soon the small kitchen filled with the smell of fresh coffee. They sat across from each other at the wooden table, talking long into the night. Childhood memories, lost family, dreams neither had dared speak aloud before. Tarev spoke of growing up among the Tavok people of the years when soldiers forced many Apache families across harsh land into unfamiliar territory. He spoke of the long journey that took the life of his grandmother, Arvok, along with countless others. He described learning how to move through a world that needed his labor, but often rejected his presence. Lorna listened quietly before sharing her own memories, her mother, Miriam Ashfield, who had died when she was 12. Her father, Aldrich Ashfield, who had insisted she receive an education despite neighbors claiming it was wasted on a girl. And the slow realization that she never wanted the narrow life society expected for women. "I thought I wanted to be alone," Lorna said softly as the fire burned low and their coffee cooled. "I thought independence meant never needing anyone, that strength meant never letting yourself be vulnerable." She stared into her cup. "But maybe I was just afraid." Tarev nodded slowly. "I understand that." He hesitated before continuing. "After Sinara died." Lorna froze. It was the first time he had spoken of his late wife. "I was 23, he said quietly, newly married. That first winter she caught pneumonia." His voice lowered. "She was gone 3 days later." "Pneumonia," Tarev said quietly. "She was gone in 3 days." The words lingered in the warm kitchen air. "I decided after that, loving someone was too dangerous. Opening your heart to that kind of loss didn't seem worth whatever happiness came with it. So I stayed alone." He stared down at the rough wooden table. "I convinced myself I was fine. Told myself I didn't need anyone." His eyes lifted to hers. "Then I met you. And I realized something. I hadn't really been living all those years. I'd only been getting by." Lorna Ashfield slowly reached across the table and took his hand. "I'm scared too," she admitted softly. "Scared of what it means to want you. Scared of what might happen if this goes wrong." Her fingers tightened around his. "But what frightens me more is the thought of 10 years passing and realizing I was too afraid to try." Tarev pushed back his chair and stood. He pulled her gently to her feet, and suddenly they were standing close together in the small kitchen. Close enough that Lorna could feel the warmth of his body and see the strong pulse beating in his throat. "Lorna," he said, his voice rough with restraint. "Tell me to leave. Tell me this is happening too fast, that you need time." He swallowed. "Because if I don't walk out that door right now—" "Don't go," she whispered. The words barely left her lips. "Stay. Please." Tarev didn't hesitate again. He kissed her. The moment carried none of the awkward politeness Lorna remembered from the brief courtship she'd once endured years earlier. This kiss, burned with months of quiet longing, finally set free. His hands rose to cradle her face, his touch surprisingly gentle, despite the hunger behind it. Lorna leaned into him instinctively, gripping the front of his shirt as if afraid he might disappear if she let go. When they finally separated, both of them, breathing hard, Tarev rested his forehead against hers. "I should still leave," he murmured without much conviction. This is moving fast." "I know," Lorna replied. "And if you want to slow down, if you need space, I understand." She shook her head slightly. "But Tarev, I've spent most of my life doing what was expected of me. Being careful. Guarding myself from every possible risk." Her voice trembled. "Just once I want to choose what I actually want instead of what I'm supposed to want." Her eyes held his. "And right now, I want you." Without another word, Tarev lifted her easily into his arms. He carried her the few steps to the table and set her carefully on its edge so they were nearly eye level. Her skirts gathered around her knees as she felt the solid wood beneath her and the closeness of him standing between her legs. Her heart pounded so fiercely she thought he might hear it. "Lorna," he said quietly. His hands settled on her waist, his thumbs slowly tracing small circles through the fabric of her dress. "Are you sure about this? Because once we cross that line, nothing stays the same." I'm sure, she answered, though her voice trembled. I'm terrified, but I'm sure. Are you? Instead of answering, Tarev kissed her again. This time there was no restraint. Lorna wrapped her legs around his waist, pulling him closer, and a low groan escaped him. The sturdy table supported her weight as she braced her hands against it, while his lips moved from her mouth down along her jaw and to the side of her neck, where her pulse raced beneath his touch. Lorna, he murmured against her skin, his voice strained. If you don't want this, if you need me to stop. Don't stop, she breathed, hardly recognizing her own voice. Please, don't stop. She shifted closer, trying to ease the tension building through her body. The movement made Tarev inhale sharply. His hands tightened around her waist, holding her still. Keep moving like that, he warned softly, his voice edged with heat, and you'll find out exactly what happens. The words carried equal parts, warning, promise, and invitation. Lorna understood then that they had crossed into a place where conversation meant little. What mattered now was the quiet language of touch, breath, and truth. She moved again, deliberately. Tarev's restraint broke. What followed was clumsy and tender and overwhelming all at once, two people discovering each other with a mixture of nervous excitement and genuine care. They moved from the kitchen into Lorna's bedroom, leaving behind both their caution and their clothing. Slowly, they learned the shape of each other's bodies, guided by soft whispers and hesitant laughter. Despite his obvious desire, Tarev remained careful, constantly asking if she was comfortable, if she was certain if he was moving too fast. And Lorna, who had spent years guarding her independence like armor, found herself letting go completely. For the first time in her life, she trusted someone with that kind of closeness. Later, they lay tangled together in the narrow bed, both breathing slowly as the room settled into quiet darkness. Tears slipped down Lorna's temples. Tarev noticed immediately, his hand lifted gently, brushing them away. Did I hurt you? He asked, concern clear in his voice. No, Lorna said quickly. She laughed softly through the tears. No, it's just, I didn't know it could feel like that. I didn't know you could feel safe and reckless at the same time. She looked up at him. Like you're still yourself? But somehow changed all at once. Tarev pulled her closer, tucking her head beneath his chin. I know, he said quietly. I felt it too. His voice softened, like everything that happened before tonight was just leading here. They talked long into the night, their voices low in the darkness, as they spoke about the future and the fears waiting beyond the morning. They both knew what daylight would bring. Questions from neighbors like Gideon Crowhurst and the townsfolk, judgment from men like Garrick Sloan, whispers from traders and travelers passing through the territory. Practical worries about how two people like them could build a life together in a world that refused to recognize their bond. Yet lying there beside one another, none of those problems seemed impossible. They had honesty, they had courage, and they had each other. Tarev stayed the next day, and the day after that. He helped around the trading post, openly making no effort to hide that he and Lorna were together now. Some customers, men like Darius Crowell, looked at them with quiet disapproval. A few voices carried harsher judgment. But most people cared only whether business continued as usual. And business did continue. Over the following months, Lorna Ashfield and Tarev built a life together. They never married in the legal sense, yet their commitment to one another felt stronger than any ceremony. Tarev began using the trading post as the center of his freighting routes, expanding the business Aldrich Ashfield had started years before. Soon the post served settlers, travelers, and the Tavok community alike. It became a rare place where people from different worlds could meet and trade without the bitterness that often poisoned the frontier. Their life was not without struggle. Some suppliers, especially men like Brant Holloway, refused to do business with them. Others muttered insults about Lorna choosing an Apache man, and there was always the quiet knowledge that their happiness existed in a fragile space that could turn dangerous if the wrong kind of hatred found its way to their door. Yet there was also joy. Quiet evenings beside the fire. A small garden behind the trading post where they worked side by side. The simple comfort of building something together. They never had children, partly by choice and partly by fate. Instead, they created something different, a place where people who didn't quite belong anywhere else could gather without judgment. Years later, when both their hair had turned silver and the Oklahoma Territory had become a state, Lorna would sometimes remember that icy February afternoon when Tarev had caught her before she fell. The moment when everything had begun to change. She often told him he had saved her life that day, not only from falling on the ice, but from another kind of fall. The slow descent into loneliness that comes from living too cautiously. And Tarev would smile and remind her of something else. That she had saved him too. The slow, quiet life of isolation and regret that waits for people who spend too many years afraid to open their hearts. And every time Lorna Ashfield said that, Tarev would gently shake his head and remind her of something else. "You saved me too," he would say. He told her that meeting her had shown him a truth he had forgotten after Sanara died, that merely surviving each day was not the same thing as truly living. Lorna had reminded him that love, no matter how complicated or risky it might become, was still worth choosing. Their life together was never simple. There were hardships, harsh words from men like Garrick Sloan, quiet suspicion from strangers passing through, and the occasional trouble stirred up by men such as Brant Holloway, who refused to accept what they could not understand. But the life they built together belonged entirely to them. It was grounded in honesty, strengthened by courage, and shaped by one quiet but powerful decision to see each other not through the narrow rules of the world around them, but as two human beings worthy of respect, trust, and love. In the end, that choice proved stronger than prejudice, stronger than fear. And for Lorna Ashfield and Tarev, it was more than enough. It was everything. Finally, let me send my deep thanks to you. Thank you for listening. If this story has touched your heart, I invite you to stay with us to discover more true tales of the Wild West. Stories that honor resilience, tenderness, and the spirit that God placed in those who blaze the trail. Subscribe, share. Leave your thoughts in the comments and join us once again to journey across this untamed land. Thank you. Aviso legal/disclaimer. These stories are crafted purely for entertainment and may contain imaginative additions or dramatic interpretations inspired by old frontier eras. We use AI-based resources, voice imagery, and drafting as part of our creative process. But every final detail is carefully reviewed and shaped by human effort to preserve emotional depth and authenticity. We strictly follow YouTube's rules regarding AI-generated content and refrain from deepfakes, altered identities, or misleading representations. All images, sounds, and related materials are lawfully obtained. Please do not reuse, modify, or distribute any portion of this content without written permission. Thank you for valuing creativity, respect, and original work.